right, guys, welcome back from lunch. So what we got to do now is we have to say, let's dive back into the data. All right. Okay, guys, welcome back from lunch. Let's jump right back in. So we've already spent some time kind of understanding the basic structure of Burp, and we're down in here and we're looking at the proxy. So for example, this is looking at a request going to wp-login.php. You guys can see that right here. Okay, now if you want to change different pieces of the website request, repeater is probably what you want to do, right? So if you remember what I said, you may browse the site and then go back and look, and as you find things, say, okay, let me shoot that over to repeater and let me change these things. So here's an example of that's what's going on, right? You're going through the history, and you go, that parameter looks really interesting, so let me shoot that over to the repeater. And then once it's inside of repeater, you go, okay, here's the request, here's the response. You click on the parameters and you change whatever it is you want to change, and then you resend it. Now, you can use this for more than just pen testing. Like, you can do, testing inside of the app, functional testing. You can do debugging, like if you're actually the developer working on the website. A lot of people like to use Burp Suite for that. Really good at analyzing, packets and actual HTTP requests. Pretty handy. Okay, let's say you're in a situation where you want to try some of the cross-site scripting and those types of things. Then I think you're going to like that, because that would be the same place where you get yourself a pretty good list of payloads and you start throwing them in there and, shooting them this way. Now, with SQL injection, that's not that big of a deal, but with cross-site scripting, it is. Because you're going to see that cross-site scripting, as an example, is heavily browser specific. So let's say we're looking at all right, come on. Hope I haven't lost internet. Let's see what's going on. Yeah, I've got internet. Oh, well, I guess the page not up anymore. Hmm. So here's a mirror of it. Let's see if I can find the part that I wanted to show you. No, this isn't what I wanted to show you. Okay, this is an example. Yes, this is what I wanted to show you. Okay, so you start running into these different variances of cross-site scripting, and you're going to run into cases where certain cross-site scripting attacks only work in certain browsers. So you're going to deal with cases of, if you don't have something like Burp and you're just trying to do cross-site scripting in Firefox, some of them don't work in Internet Explorer and vice versa. So you get around that problem. You get around that problem using the repeater, right? So, it automatically handles URL encoding. It's really good for loading your filter bypass stuff. But remember, you're chained to a proxy. So you still are going to have some cases where stuff renders the way it does because of your proxy, because of your browser's JavaScript rendering engine. Here you can see the response coming back. Okay, SQL injection. Here's another example where you may be sending a lot of SQL injection and a lot of people thinking that they don't need to defend against it. A lot of people thinking that they don't need to defend against it because they're going to say something like, oh, we're using prepared statements, right? But you can do so much with just taking your fuzz list and then trying so many different variants. So, for example, a wait for delay or a benchmark attack. I haven't really covered this kind of stuff, but there's so many different things that you can send. Right. So here's an example of a post request where we're sending a benchmark. So you can see right here, benchmark right there. It's effectively a wait for delay, right? We are trying to tell it to wait, do this, hold on this amount of time before you come back. If you hold on that amount of time and then come back, I know that there's code execution on the back end. Indirect object access, this is another one, right? Insecure direct object. So it says the attacker who is an authorized system user simply changes a parameter value that directly refers to a system object to another object that the user isn't authorized for. Because you can just jump right in repeater and change what it's pointing to. So I'm here inside of repeater. You can just change these values. So, the user may be going to ID equals 1. You change it to ID equals 5. And again, these are the things that people always ask, well, how do you know if this is vulnerable or not? You don't. You only know by looking. And here is where automated web app scanners really kind of fall down. You're going to find that if you don't manually look, right, if you don't say to yourself, all right, when I sent it this request, I looked at this page. Then as an authenticated user, I tried to look at the same page. Then as a privileged user, I tried to look at the same page. Are there any differences in the page? Okay, are there places that an authenticated user can go that a non-authenticated user cannot? Are there places that a privileged user can go that an unprivileged user cannot? And then without this sort of repeater sequencer where you can say, here's where I want to go, here's the things I want to do, it's hard to figure that out. So here's those cases where you keep incrementing all of the different parameters in the HTTP request, including the session information, trying to see if that changes what you can do. Also, appending additional parameters to it. Right? All these things are things that you need to consider. So here you can see that you can send so many different requests, and you can make so many changes to the HTTP request itself. Okay, now again, I'm not really trying to go real deep into Pro. I guess the way to look at it is, if that's something that people want, I'll cover Pro, maybe in another class. Maybe we'll do a 3-day class instead of 2 days. Spend more time on Pro. There's a couple of things that you're going to get, right? One, Pro is multi-threaded, free is not, right? So Pro is faster. And yeah, for sure. Can you get by on the free version? Yeah. Would you prefer the paid version? And I think it's $250 the last time I checked. For that price, it's definitely not unreasonable to go with Pro. Okay, you definitely can do things like, excuse me, adding a blacklist to ensure that you don't mess up stuff you're not supposed to mess with. If the customer's telling you that he's concerned about a particular area of the website, or the reporting functionality of the website, or the login functionality of the website, or the contact us functionality of the website, for example, maybe the contact us functionality of the website literally sends an email, right? So they don't want you pinging it, and making it send hundreds and hundreds of emails. Automated scanners do that, right? So it's not uncommon for poor little secretary to end up with 20,000 emails all saying script alert, right? Because you didn't exclude, that particular portion of the website or that particular component within that page of the website. Okay. You're going to run into things like, cross-site request forgery tokens. Things that you're going to have to test manually. Sometimes you're going to run into components on a website that an automated scanner like CAPTCHA, just really doesn't deal with very well. So you're going to have a way to deal with that. Making sure that you don't do things like insert and update. These are big ones on databases, right? You want to make sure that you don't hurt the database. You want to make sure that you don't, run commands against the database that are going to do damage. And we keep coming back to this, right? If you're comfortable with manual testing, you wouldn't have this problem in the first place. But because you're not comfortable with manual testing, when you grab something like Burp, it's a little confusing. It's a little scary, because you grab some fuzz list off the internet and you figure, hey, this will be pretty good. And you turn around and bring the server down. Okay. Okay, how do I look for vulnerabilities? I like to scan blindly. Might as well just tell you the truth. So I run the proxy, run the spider, and then, when I have Pro, I just pros on my other laptop. I literally scan blindly. The reason I literally scan blindly is because I run a couple of other scanners as well. I run Acunetics, I run WebInspect, and then with Burp Suite, I scan blindly. And then in my browser, I just go off and manually do stuff. Now, you're going to find some people who like to go through the website and then anything that they think is interesting, they right-click and send that over to Intruder, and they just mess with those things that they think are interesting. And if you're going to be doing a lot of pure manual stuff, then I think that's really good. I really think that's really good. You definitely could try integrating Burp Suite with other tools like SQLmap, W3AF, Metasploit. There's so many other things you can integrate Metasploit with. Integrate Burp Suite with, and that makes it really interesting too. Now, what's nice is you're going to need, excuse me here, drop my cell phone. You're going to need to really get in here and understand the website. So spidering it at a very minimum, you're going to have to do. You're going to need to go through it and say, okay, well, here's what the website really looks like, and here's the pieces of the website that I need to, get a feel for. I'm trying to think of what's a good way to say this. Like, you cruise through the website, you try to get a feel for it, and you try to ask yourself, if I were the guy writing this, why would I do what he did right there? Why would you do that? And if you can ask yourself that question, and the scavenger hunt, the Easter egg hunt begins, then I think you'll be really good at web app testing. Web app testing is tedious. It's extremely, extremely tedious. Okay. All right, so here's the caution. Remember I told you I scan blindly? Scanning blindly can be bad. I mean, you can do bad stuff to the website if you're not careful. My experience with that is extremely poorly written websites run into that. But until you feel a little bit more comfortable, I think you're going to scan blindly. As you do more manual web app stuff, then I think, you start to get a little bit more selective. Also, you don't want to feel like you're wasting time. I think that's another thing that you have to be conscious of. You're going to feel like you're wasting a lot of time throwing so many automated things at a site because you're waiting for all these automated things to finish. So as you get more comfortable, you're going to want to do more manual stuff because you feel like there's a little bit more control of it, and you feel like we're not wasting time. Okay, so right here you can see where the spider status has actually got a track of how much requests were made, where traffic is going, and then you can see in your scan queue what's next, so you can kind of get a feel of where you're at. Now, Burp Suite won't, unless you're in the pro version, tell you this is vulnerable. You got to do some deductive reasoning. You got to figure it out for yourself. So what does that mean? That means if you can't manually figure out if something's vulnerable to SQL injection cross-site scripting, you're not going to be able to figure out with the free version of Burp Suite. Now, with the paid version, where it's got the vulnerability scanner built in, yeah, because it'll tell you, hey, there's cross-site scripting here. But if you're just messing with a website by hand and you're not comfortable doing it by hand, so you figure, let me grab Burp Suite, I don't recommend that. I don't recommend that. Okay. Yeah, I'm reading a question here. I wish I could tell you that it wasn't a feel thing, but it really is. It really is. So okay, the question is, how do you know how how basically he's asking, how do you know how robust of a list to use? And the simple truth is, it's experience. You've done it enough times. You feel like 30 or 40 different entities in your fuzz list is good, or you want 200-300 things in your fuzz list for SQL injection as an example. And that's great. The problem with it is, the more that you do, the longer this test is going to take you. Okay. So this is capturing a request. Oh, excuse me. Let me get some water. Excuse me. So this is capturing a request and replaying it, modifying it, and sending it on. Now this sort of thing, intruder, you're going to use a lot. You find parameters that look interesting to you, you shoot them off to intruder, and you really kind of give them the beat down with the fuzz databases. I mean, that's really what you can do. And you're going to use the wildcard. You're going to select different parts of the request and send them as well. So here you can see Burp is sending a script alert to the post request for services, assessment services on strategicsec.com. And here you see that it's doing the same thing. Now, if you want to turn around and you want to automate what you're doing in Repeater, you can use Intruder for that, right? So you can deal with things like brute forcing, you can deal with things like cross-site request forgery tokens, you can load your own payloads, like you've got a lot you can do. So this is one of the questions that you get a whole lot of. So when people see things like Intruder, they see that Intruder has Sniper, Battering Ram, Pitchfork, and Cluster Bomb. And they're like, well, hey, I'd really like to know, how do I use that stuff? And really, they're really not that bad. You just need to realize, okay, what am I doing with it, right? So if you have a single set of payloads, and then for every variable, you're going to assign one payload to that variable, right? Well, that's going to be Sniper. It's basically single shot. That's it. Single shot. That's really all Sniper is. And 99 times out of 100, that's what you're going to be using, right? The request has one parameter. That's what you're going to be messing with. Now, Battering Ram is a single set of payloads, but in each iteration, a value is assigned to all variables. So let's say you have a situation where you've got ID equals 5, ampersand user equals Joe, ampersand logged in equals true. Well, that's 3 sets of parameter name, parameter value pairs. You can use Battering Ram because you want to take this fuzz database and you want to iterate through every different payload and parameter, right? Now, You can also use battery RAM, right? So multiple payload sets instead of one payload set. And then each payload set is dedicated to a variable, right? So it'll iterate through all your payloads at the same time, and it'll insert one payload into each defined position. So if you've got lots of different places in the website that take in data, or inside of one HTTP request, there's just lots and lots of different places, it's really hard to do without something like Burp Suite. Most other tools just don't have this kind of stuff. So this is what I was talking about. So in that payload set, you may decide that you want to send, more attacks. Well, if that's the case, then you're probably going to want, cluster bomb as an example. Okay, so now you got this massive list, and the same way you saw me go through it, you've got to scroll through it. So you need to look through all those 400s. You need to look through all those 500s and 300s and 200s, and you've got to get a feel. Like, if it's a 200, okay, is this exactly what I want it to be seeing? Is this a 200, is this a 300 redirect? Well, is it being done on a critical page? Right? Do they have redirects happening on critical pages? Yes or no? What if it's a 500 internal server? Well, why do they have verbose error messages turned on? Just the whole kit and caboodle. So there's really no right way to do it, right? You can proxy, you can spider, and then you can run the scanner. You can proxy, then you can immediately go through the repeater and then deal with intruder and scanner. And, pretty much if you load it up as a proxy, you do repeater, it's in-depth scanning, and that's pretty much the whole thing. Now you're going to find that a lot of security people that are on staff, this is really what they do, right? They test a certain number of apps each year, and they try to fuzz them and try to see if they can make the app, puke all over itself, because that's usually the sign that you're on the right path. So, people who have decent error handling, you're just not going to run into as much. Okay, we'll skip the automation stuff. Next week, when I was talking with Aaron and Tino, the guys who were helping me with this, I was talking about covering like maybe Carbonator. So what Carbonator does is Carbonator is what's used for Burp Suite automation. Here's Carbonator. Okay, Pro's $250. Okay, all right. So let's take that question. All right. So D-Lip's question is, I get this question from developers a lot. How can I have an SQL injection when I use a prepared statement? Can you prove this? I have no answer when they ask me to prove that they're still vulnerable. I'd say the easiest thing to do is to run SQL injection against it. SQL map will be the tool that I would use. So if you have a parameter, first of all, let's jump down on the prepared statements. Okay, I'm trying to find a good reference. Here we go. Okay. So what you want to tell them on the prepared statements front, can someone just give me a question so I can respond to it? Thanks. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to say, yeah, parameterized queries are actually the correct solution. Can prepared statements be used to prevent SQL injection? The answer is yes, they can if they are done correctly. So a prepared statement can still have dynamic variables or dynamic data be injected into it, and therefore potentially still vulnerable to SQL injection. Okay, yeah, we're recorded. Okay, Jen is interested in a pro class. Do I recommend Do I typically web app test during a lull in activity? Um, do you mean like while I'm doing network stuff, if we're not real busy, do I do web app? Is that what you mean, Stuart? Okay. It's actually the other way around. My pen testing business is more application specific. I do way more app tests than I do network tests. And very few people, me and Jason Haddock's the one who's in the classroom, we talk about this a lot because very few people are in the business of doing network. Some people are, but our experience, his experience is similar to mine, where it's mostly been app. Now, what's funny is I talked to a lot of other pen testers, and they're still doing network stuff. And my experience is those guys still doing network stuff typically work in the government. I don't know anybody testing networks today that works in the financial services world. Everybody works in the app space, at least in my world. Okay. In terms of difficulty, how big is the difference between a typical poorly designed site and a safe one that's been hit by bug bounty hunters? Okay. In my experience, most of the people who do just the generic messing around with websites really are not that good. Most of these people who do anonymous and all this kind of stuff really are not that good. Now, that doesn't mean you won't run into somebody who is good. You do run into people who are very good, even though they don't work in the field. The best for the yawning is the running code. Thanks, buddy. I don't know. The pretty robust sites don't take me that long because, most of the stuff is fixed. And for me, it matters how old the website is. If the site's pretty old, then yeah, I try to look as thorough as I can because there's going to be legacy problems. But if it's a pretty brand new server with updated development framework, I personally don't go as hard because I know there's just not going to be as much there. Okay, does Burp Suite Professional have this kind of documentation to understand this? I would say yes. So they've just created a new Burp Suite series that walks you through how to use Burp Suite to test for each particular vulnerability. And that's free on their site. Okay, so will I be following up with a demo of Intruder? Yes. I got something in my eye. Okay, I'm trying to benchmark, and the time delay is in the payload in PHP scan as payload in the PHP session ID parameter. It is fingerprinting the back end. Okay. Experience has been odd. Okay, trying to go from WebGo. That's a good one. trying to go from WebGoat to a real app is difficult. And I think you're going to kind of see now that you're doing this why I'm not actually a really big fan of WebGoat. I do think it's good to get started, but if you want to do more than get started, I don't think it's there. WebGoat, Damn Vulnerable Web App, these are all things that are designed to help you get familiar with basic attacks. There's no quirks, there's no different tricks, there's intentionally vulnerable software is not very good for us as pen testers, right? Because you've got to learn to just browse the web page like a user and look for vulnerabilities. Okay, automation, we'll talk about Carbonate. So here's Carbonator, right? So it's a Burp Suite Pro extension that automates the scope, spider, and scan from the command line. It helps you automate vulnerability scanning. If you were to scan 1 or 100 apps, this would be definitely what you want to go for. Okay. If there's a cross-site request forgery token, Burp has the ability to grab that token and check to see if the session is still valid. Okay, and making requests, I should have had some explanation of what's going on here, but making requests to make sure that the request is still valid. Define behavior that's dependent upon the session ID. So as long as he's not authenticated, he knows in order to interact with the system that's being authenticated, I need to supply credentials. Okay, and let's see what else we got. Okay, a whole lot more automation. Same thing like you see here. We can change the GET and the POST request. Okay, sorry guys, I'm feeling it. A little tired. All right, so here's an example of, you can see the parameter handling. Got to clean that up. Probably shouldn't have profanity in there. It's a little mistake. Good job, Tino. So you can see it's got a cross-site request forgery token. You can say derived from the previous response. Go ahead and snatch that thing because it'll probably be required for later on. And then you can set up stuff to have happen at particular intervals. So like if I come across this, do this. Right? You can call those macros. All right, now let's stop. Let's take a break. We're at almost 2. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about extending Burp.